Hello, everybody. It's a big pleasure being again with all our global poultry school audience. We are very pleased today to keep moving forward in this wonderful collaboration that we have done with the Experimental Poultry Center in the province on Antwerp. Today we have with us Niels Demaître, and he's gonna be sharing with us animal welfare in layer Hens. So, Niels, thank you very much for being with us and for the willingness to sharing your knowledge and your work. And this presentation is going to be around 45 minutes. If somebody in the audience has some questions, we will be more welcome to answer. And like always, this webinar is going to be recorded and is going to be accessible by free, so anybody can watch it anytime. So thank you very much, Niels, and you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rodolfo, for the introduction. My name is Niels. I work for the Experimental Poultry Center for almost 4 years now. Um, the Experimental Poultry Center is located in Geel, in the province of Antwerp, Flanders, Belgium, actually. And I'm going to talk about animal welfare today, more specifically the welfare research we are conducting in our own laying hen house, and also talking about our Interreg Northern Western Europe project Omelette. But first of all, I would like to start with a brief introduction, which I call the modern approach to animal welfare, a subtitle from the 5 freedoms to the 5 domains. Let's have a closer look. Of course, animal welfare is quite important here in Europe. It's actually a key concern in modern poultry farming nowadays, as actually a good welfare is linked to animal health, productivity, and also sustainability. Animal health and welfare go hand in hand. Also, when we have a good animal welfare, poultry welfare, and the health is also okay, we get also good results. The productivity, so a good return on investment on good management practices, proactive hand management, for instance. And also here we see a lot of public awareness and consumer expectations in the EU, demanding high welfare standards also. And also that has an influence on our, let's say, on our regulations, and directive. Here we see quite briefly the EU framework, which are quite strict considering welfare legislation. For instance, we had since 2012 already that battery cages are banned, actually, so we don't have them anymore. We also have minimum standards on the enriched cages, barns, so aviary housing, and also free range systems. Also, we have here in Belgium the end of cage age, I should say. Enriched cages won't be allowed anymore in Flanders from 2038 onward. In Wallonie, so in Belgium we have two parts, a Flemish, Dutch-speaking part, but in Wallonie they are banned earlier, from 2028 onward, so in about 3 years already. That's the French-speaking part. And of course, what is the aim? Ensuring laying hens that can express natural behaviors and live in improved conditions. The welfare in the EU has traditionally been framed, let's say, around 5 freedoms. So we have freedom from hunger and thirst, also discomfort, pain, injury, and disease. Also freedom to express natural behaviors, and also freedom from fear and chronic stress. However, there are some limitations considering these 5 freedoms. They're actually considered outdated. Why? Because they are too negative, focusing on avoiding suffering and not promoting well-being of the animals. So, as I already mentioned, misses a lot of positive tones, ignores the need for positive emotional states, and behavior is often overlooked, so limited support for natural behavior through environment. So it got quite some criticism, too little emphasis on positive experiences and good quality of life. So actually, a brief summary on this part is that the focus is mainly on avoiding suffering, but not including the affective state of the animal. That's actually why we see a tendency from the five freedoms to the five domains, which were developed by David Meller and which are considered a more modern framework, um, expanding actually the concept of welfare and also including, of course, these positive experiences. Um, Also, this five domain perspective provides a more holistic assessment, of welfare, which is quite relevant nowadays in the EU for conducting our farming practices. So we have the first one, nutrition, environment, and health, covering actually the basic health stadium of the animal, the behavior part also, and an affective state. Um, I made a slide with a lot of information on it. So, as already told, three aspects: basic health, covered by nutrition, environment, and health. I also made a split up between management kind of things and then indicators. Indicators are actually quite important to us because they tell us something about these four domains. Of course, a mental domain, so the mental aspect covered by this affective state, is quite difficult to measure. We can't say how an animal feels. That's why we need these indicators on the other domains in order to say something about the affective states. And that's what I try to envision in this slide um, on a more structural way. Um, of course, a lot of information, also many different aspects. In this presentation, I will limit it to some specific aspects, more specifically domains, the environment I will highlight, climate, also including lighting schemes. That's something we did some research on, past flock. So I want to show you these results and also tell you the reason why we investigated this aspect, and also the environmental enrichment part. So we also did some trials and experiments considering environmental enrichment like packing blocks, alfalfa hay bales, but also other rotating materials we put in the barn and see what effect they have on the positive aspect. Because nowadays in Europe, there are also a lot of research going on the positive animal welfare, which is called POW. Yeah. Then I'll also talk about behavioral aspects, specifically abnormal behaviors like feather pecking, which we obviously don't want to see in our hen house, but of course it does occur. And I also will tell you something about how do we measure it. So we look at feather scores, plumage of the animals. Also a small part, I just will mention it about toe pecking, which is quite an issue in white flocks nowadays here in Europe, which might also have a genetic source, but many triggers influencing that specific behavior. Um, so on that part, the behavioral aspect, also the piling aspect will be explained later on in this presentation. And about the health specific part, which will be quite short, I will tell you something about genetics because we did some research on an alternative hybrid we've tested in to look at the longevity specifically, and also parasite control because we had quite a big project on monitoring and also looking at the poultry red mite. but more about this later. Um, First of all, I want to give you the broader information about the project Omelette, which is an Interreg Northern Western Europe project. It's, as I already mentioned, a transnational project to make the egg production in Northern West Europe more sustainable. So I already told you sustainability is quite an important aspect also. And the focus of the project is actually on improving hen longevity. So making flocks last longer, but in a good way. Looking at production or technical aspects, but especially also welfare aspects and health aspects of the animal. And of course, if all those aspects go quite well, we also try to improve or increase farm profitability. How will we do it with innovation? So we have, for instance, the lighting schemes we have done some research on, but also the hybrid aspects, also the environmental enrichment. And we also look at digitalization using cameras, for instance, to automatically detect specific behaviors or count hens interacting with enrichment materials, for instance, but more about that later on in this presentation. And of course, as already said, it's a transnational project. It's a collaboration between a lot of partners. If you have a look, we have partners in France, in the Netherlands, of course, also some partners in Belgium, for instance, the University of Leuven, and also in Germany, the Hochschule Osnabrück, and also even in Switzerland, we are collaborating with the University of Bern. Also for the specifics like the lighting procedures or lighting schemes we are investigating, Hato is a professional company delivering specific poultry lighting equipments. Yeah, this is in general about the Omelette project. So we have in Northern Western Europe, we do face diverse national challenges, actually challenges which are quite regional. The poultry sector is quite diverse also here in Northern Western Europe with some differences in keeping, for instance, white or brown hens, but also in housing types. But despite these regional differences, we also have common issues like toe packing, feather packing, and stuff. So in the Omelette project, we do bring together 5 countries to tackle all these shared challenges through collaboration, of course. For now, I will focus on what research has been going on in our hen house. We do own an unique European facility for semi-commercial research. And I will highlight all these aspects in this presentation. So about the enrichment use, and together with the lighting strategies, which will be the first part of this session about actually the environmental part or the environmental domain. Also about feather condition score, so feather pecking, and also piling behavior, which will be the domain of behavior, of course, and the resilient hybrids, so more the genetic part, I will also highlight at the end of the presentation. I think here we will have an overlap with other poultry school sessions from my colleagues Tom and Natalie, who already explained what we do. So I'll keep this quite briefly. So what we see here is actually our laying hen house. It's a floor plan which is comparted or segmented, divided in multiple compartments, each all having a different system. Like the orange ones is a two-row aviary system. The blue ones is a one-row aviary system, and the gray ones are enriched cages. Semi-commercial, why? Because we have test units of a lot of animals, let's say about 1,000 to 1,325 hens per test unit in our aviary systems. So it's not fundamental research we do. We are aiming and doing actually really applied research in order to also give advice to the broader sector and also poultry farmers. So that's, in our opinion, very interesting and also very important, of course. Also, the aspect of this many test units makes it possible to set up different experimental trials, and in that way we can compare different housing systems, but also different hybrids. Also the nutritional part, so different kinds of feed and stuff. Now I would want to highlight specific research we have been conducted past flock. I would like to start with the climate aspect, like more specifically, I wanted to say about the optimizing the lighting strategies, and then I'll have a talk about the environmental enrichment and its use. What we see here is actually a picture of two compartments where you see a totally different lighting strategy. On the left-hand side, we actually have like a control where we only perform warm white light. Of course, our hens had 15 hours light, so the whole day they have this warm light. In the dynamic part, you see on the right-hand side of the picture, we simulate daylight by blending in cool white. In that way, we actually simulate what's going on outside. So warmer light, simulating sun going up and going down. And then actually in the peak around 11, we have a very big difference, as you can see on the picture, a very cold white light. But why do we explore innovative dynamic lighting strategies? That's actually the main question about this research, of course. What we see is actually birds and many other animals are quite sensitive to light spectrum and intensity. For the laying hens, that's not different. So shifting from warm to cooler light during day mimics actually the natural sunlight, which stimulates activity in the flock, so which should be good. So also having an effect on multiple domains, of course. That's what I actually want to show you in this slide. So behavioral effects on the dynamic lighting flock tend to show more natural patterns, exploring, feeding, also social interactions rather than long inactive periods. On a welfare impact, a higher, more evenly distributed activity reduces issues like boredom, feather packing, and also clustering of animals, which is called piling. While also encouraging healthier movement and rest cycles. So that's actually why we want to implement these innovative dynamic lighting strategies. Also, what is the scientific basis? Colder white enriched light has been shown to increase alertness and activity not only in humans but also in animals by influencing the circadian regulation. So in this way, we hope also to see these effects implementing these. So potential welfare benefits are actually less stress, reduced boredom, and hopefully a healthier flock dynamics. So what we see now, we actually did the research in three hybrids. So decalb white, Isa brown, and the Warren brown hybrid, which is the alternative hybrid I will tell you more about at the end of this presentation. And we want to have a look at the welfare indicators. So the most graphs at the top, you can see, are actually the combined feather score conditions. So in time, that's the x-axis, where you see age, you see a decrease in feather score conditions. What we'd like to see is actually that both lines are quite similar. Um, which means there is actually no impact of the dynamic lighting scheme versus the monotone. As you see in decal white, there is a difference. We did, of course, management-wise, some follow-up, but it is not it cannot be attributed to the lighting. There were other issues, more on a nutritional scale. Which were the basis of the difference you can see. But also, as you can see in keel bone fractures, as we, of course, tend to increase the activity in a couple, you might have more keel bone fractures, but as you can see, especially for the Isa Brown hens and Warren Brown, there was no difference. And overall in wounds, we didn't see any statistical significant difference, let's say. Of course, there is a difference. Just looking at technical aspects, production, egg weights, and stuff, everything was very, very similar. So we didn't see any um, differences at that point of view. Another aspect, what we can say is, what do we see is actually the hen weights were less in the dynamic aspects, which actually may mean that indeed activity is stimulated, they get to move more in the barn, and that way, as also other technical aspects were similar, we can say activity is indeed increased in our dynamic lighting strategy, which is good. And that's something we'd like to confirm and also investigate current flock by using cameras and looking at the activity patterns in the barn. But another big difference, and that's actually quite an important one, is the difference in light intensity. Of course, when having a flock, things might happen, feather packing or other issues, and light intensity is quite an important aspect in that way to cope or manage specific issues during the flock. And what we have with dynamic light has actually quite some advantages when you compare it to monotone lighting, because you are quite flexible for gradual adjustments. Instead of lowering lux, for instance, we are able to change CCT. CCT is actually the color temperature of the lights, or increasing or decreasing specific CCT zones, which means, like, for instance, cold white light, we make the period of cold white light shorter instead of reducing light intensity as being the first step. So that's quite a big benefit, not only for the hen's well-being, but also for the staff. It's an easier management when you can go in the barn and you have a higher lux or light intensity. So in the dynamic aspect, we ended the flock at an age of 92 weeks for both white and brown hens, and we ended up with 19 lux on average in the dynamic lighting strategies, and only 12 lux for the monotone ones. So that's quite a big difference. But like the activity aspect, what I was explaining about the weight of the hens, that's something we should have a closer look at current flock. So I can't tell you anything about it for now. A second thing I want to talk to you about is actually enrichment use. What we also do is monitoring this enrichment use. What we do use, which enrichments do we use? That's what I wanted to say, is actually packing blocks. We have alfalfa hay bales, and also rotating materials, but I'll show you in a minute. But why does enrichment matter? That's the big question, and why should we monitor this? So the enrichment placed in the hen house, of course, has an effect on welfare and improved well-being, and hopefully also an extended lifespan, so longer productive lives. And that's actually what it's all about within the Omelette project, about hen longevity, proactive hen management, of which enrichment is, of course, a step, and of course also sustainability, so more resilient egg production systems. But by monitoring this enrichment use, we use it actually as a welfare indicator to be used for proactive hen management. So manual monitoring on a weekly basis has actually quite some negative aspects. So just looking at the hens, in my opinion, yeah, you have as an observer, you always have an influence. That's why we are looking at specific methods to automatize this by cameras. Um, Also, what we actually want to do is seeing if there's a pattern in consumption use of these enrichments. What do I mean to say? In this way, of course, natural behavior of hens does have like a um, daily basis of tasks: laying eggs, eating, drinking, preening, other positive aspects. But also the use of enrichment is a part of the daily behaviors of the animals, and we like to see when do they tend to consume these enrichment more often. That's actually quite simply said what we like to do. Here you see a picture of enrichment. So in the back you see the alfalfa hay bales, which provide roughage. In front you see our packing blocks, which provide also minerals and stuff, so which are also quite important. Um, Monitoring enrichment use is important, so changes in engagement can indicate early signs of suboptimal conditions. So when we see specific patterns in consumption of these enrichments, and we see a difference in the pattern during a specific period, it might be an early warning for suboptimal conditions. And in that way, we know, and we can take measures on a management basis. But as already explained, just observing, hence looking at the interaction with specific enrichments is not only time consuming. When you do it, yeah, when you do manual measurements next to time consuming, you also have an influence by being present in a hen house. That's why we are looking at a more automatic way to look at these specific patterns. What you see here is actually a screenshot of our laying hen house, the foraging area, where you can see the different enrichments we've placed in. So at the right hand side in the corner you see the packing block. Then you see it's called a spiral feeder. It's actually just a barrel which we will be filled with wheat, and there's like a spiral at the bottom, and hence can pick to the spiral, and wheat is released, and in that way they get stimulated and being enriched. And at the left hand side we see our alfalfa hay bales. What we actually do is each half hour we take a print screen, and that way you get a daily time lapse of the images. And if we want to have a look at at the consumption or interaction with specific enrichment, we just count the hens around each enrichment. So in this way we have a daily time lapse 48 images. So each half hour, we take a picture. Then we have an idea of the enrichment use of packing stones, alfalfa hay bales, and also other enrichment materials within the barn during the day. And actually, we did this for multiple months, and in that way, we are able to reconstruct this interaction pattern and see um, and have a look. For specific behavioral observations, we need to look at video recordings, of course, but that's something I will not discuss, but it's also something we've been doing past months. Okay, let's move on. Of course, counting hens at each zone of a specific enrichment is quite, as already mentioned, time consuming. That's why we try to automate this. What we've done is actually we've been labeling hens manually um, using label image, which is a program. Now I'm going to talk about the automated part of using packing blocks, which we've chosen to not only label the hens but also label the heads. In order to zoom in, just have a look at the packing block, and in that way, we want to make a model to count the heads of the animals automatically. Why head detection? Actually, I already told you a bit, but behaviorally, it would be a relevant focus, of course, because uh, head use indicates interaction with a specific type of enrichment, in this case, of course, the packing blocks. And in this way, we can improve accuracy by zooming in and only selecting the heads in a specific zone. We are quite sure the hens are interacting with the packing block. And in this way, we have lower false positives. So we only count laying hens or chickens engaging with the enrichment material. How does this look like? Well, so we zoom in on the packing block, and then you have the inner circle, which is the green one. And then by, of course, first training a YOLO V8 model, we're able to automatically do these image processing and automatically count the hens. For white hens, the model we've been training past months is very accurate. I can show you next slide. Here you see actually some examples of the accuracy. In brown hens, we still need some modeling and training because of the brown hens, which the how do I call it? You don't have this nice views because brown hens and the background interfere with each other. That's actually what I meant to say. Yeah. But also in brown hens, we see some good results, but still we need some work to be done on that matter. But for white hens, I can already also show you the results. Here you see, these are the results. So what do we see? Uh, the x-axis shows you the time of the day, so 24 hours. And in the y-axis, we see the number of hens interacting with these packing blocks. What do we see? We see actually a late afternoon activity. So last 2 hours, you see an increase of interaction with these packing blocks. So hens tend to pack stones more than, actually most than, and that likely is because they are supporting the eggshell formation in that period of the day. Um, the good thing about automatic counting these hens is that it enables continuous data, of course, objective monitoring, so no influence of someone being in the barn and doing the counting himself. And in this way, we get these pattern shifts, which are very interesting. So daily changes may also signal early flock issues. So what I want to say is actually if we see that this pattern is actually changing, um, perhaps it's an early signal that there's something going on. For example, not enough salt in the feed may influence this pattern when you tend to see more hens interacting with these and consuming these pecking blocks at another stage, for instance, early in the morning. Okay. Another thing we have been investigating is actually rotating enrichment materials. You see the different materials we've tested. So sand baths at the left-hand side, packing barrels. So the yellow barrels, they like to peck because of the sound it creates. Grit bottles, which are actually just plastic bottles filled with grit. And then also the spiral feeders. I didn't have a picture, but I already explained. These are these barrels filled with wheat and a spiral beneath them. And what did we do? We monitored the use of these enrichment also. Um, and what we tend to do is actually look at the different aspects. The video images, we also have took a look at these specifically for positive behaviors, but those results I don't have yet, but I will show you. So if we have a closer look, we had these different rotation schedules. So we rotated enrichment materials on a weekly basis and on a 3-weekly basis. On a weekly basis, so you have more frequent change of stimulation, and perhaps it stimulates curiosity and engagement. On a 3-weekly rotation, so you have a longer exposure to each material before introducing a new one, of course. So we also try to automate this part. It's also working, but for these results, I want to say we still counted the hens manually because we had some issues with overlapping images and stuff, overlapping hens in the images. Um, but that's something we're still working on. Um, let's move on to the results. So what we see here, a lot of information actually. So what we see is the upper graph is for decalb white and the weekly rotation. The graph beneath is also decalb white and the 3-weekly rotation. And we've actually done the same for Isa brown hens and Warren brown hens. The colors indicating, of course, the different kinds of rotation materials or enrichments. So the green ones are the sand baths, the orange ones, the packing barrels, the blue ones, the grit bottles, and the red ones, which were only applied in the weekly rotation scheme, are the spiral feeders. And what we see is actually quite interesting. Um, what we see is actually recurring use patterns across all breeds. Let's go back. You see these kind of patterns coming back in all graphs. What we also see is that hens tend to have a strong preference for items that are replenishable, so dust baths where we put sand in it, and also the spiral feeders where we put wheat in it. So the the interesting thing about that is actually refilling renews the interest. You can see the peaks like in the green zones, but also in the red zone. That's when actually the enrichment has been not replaced but refilled, and yeah, hence tend to be more interested again, and which is quite good because with these enrichment materials you have longer usability. What we also see is the packing barrels in orange have quite have a high interest, less, of course, than the replenishable items, but they have a higher interest, but only in the first 4 days. Grid stones indicated in blue, they had actually no interest, may actually also trigger aggression. So these grid bottles won't be used this flock anymore. And in this way, by seeing these specific patterns, we tend to have an optimized enrichment scheme. For instance, when we know that the interest of the barrels is over after 4 days, we will only apply barrels for 4 days and then rotate to, for instance, sand baths, which we can hold for 2 or even 3 weeks because interest is being renewed each time when they are being refilled. Next aspect will be about feather scoring to monitor welfare, of course. So more the behavioral aspects or domain I will explain. So about feather packing and also the aspect of piling, which also occurs in our laying hen house quite often. But why should we conduct feather condition scoring? I think everyone knows feather packing is something we don't like to see in a barn, and still it occurs. It's multifactorial, many triggers influencing this behavior. And that's why we actually conduct feather condition scoring in order to get a time lapse and have a look at how this feather condition is actually evolving through the flock or through age. Again, the different aspects from a health point of view, of course, feather cover is directly reflects the health status. Behaviorally, when feather score condition decreases, it might identify feather packing, also aggression in the flock. So quite important to do this follow-up. From an effective state point of view, we think feather condition is actually a direct welfare indicator, quite an important one. That's why we also have two systems in order to measure it, let's say. But I'll talk to you about it in the next slides. It might be also a detection method for stress, frustration, or boredom. So what we actually want to do with these measures, with performing feather condition scoring, is actually detecting welfare issues like feather pecking, injuries. Also, toe pecking is an important one, especially in white flocks. And it provides actually, if it's performed well, of course, an objective comparable data over time and enables monitoring of flock and management effectiveness. But let's have a look on how to measure it. The first method we use is actually the Towson method, which is a scientifically acknowledged method. This one we do each month on a monthly basis, where we perform feather condition scores from different parts. So the neck, wings, back, tail, and the cloaca region are being monitored. And where 4 is actually the best score and 1 is actually the lowest score, which isn't good, of course. Another way of conducting feather score conditions is actually using the pack list, which is this protocol is actually developed by us, by the Experimental Poultry Center. Nathalie worked on this one. And it is specifically used or designed for practical use because it's less time consuming, only focusing on two areas, the neck, head region, and also back and cloaca region, which are indicated in green and blue on this figure. And also, this method has been tested in the field and proven effective for monitoring welfare on a commercial scale or farms. This one we do on a weekly basis in our hen house. When talking about feather pecking, I would also would like to say something about beak trimming, which is actually banned in quite some European countries nowadays. At the right-hand side of the map, you see, yeah, actually a bit the history. As you can see, Scandinavian countries have banned beak trimming already a long time ago, but more recent bans like Denmark, Austria, also Germany and the Netherlands, um, yeah, tend to say that the poultry industry, especially in Europe, shifts away from beak trimming. For people who don't know what beak trimming is, it's actually done by infrared, where yeah, they laser the tip of the beak, and of course, with a reason because severe pecking or the uh, pecking consequences are more severe. As explained here, birds have formidable weapons for pecking, which must be managed, of course, and that's why actually trimming has been done. But nowadays, with all these bans, we tend to shift away from beak trimming. And of course, that's something we've been doing some research on for quite long. Nowadays, we only have a non-trimmed flocks, but of course, in our facilities, past 4 flocks, we could make a comparison between trimmed and non-trimmed flocks, and that's what this chapter is all about. I'll show you the results. So in 2017, we had our first flock. In orange, you see actually the distributions. So the results of the are shown as a back-to-back violent plot. It's actually a distribution if you look. With feather scores on the y-axis and age on the x-axis, trimmed hens are colored orange, non-trimmed hens gray, and they're both showing their distribution of scores. Initially, what we see is both groups had excellent feather conditions at the beginning, so at an age of 21 weeks, which is quite normal, of course. But we see that scores decreased with age, with non-trimmed hens showing lower scores from 30 weeks onward. And we also, when we have a look at the mortality was 14% for trimmed hens and 25% for non-trimmed hens, which is quite a big difference, of course. This was, of course, the first flock with non-trimmed hens. Of course, management-wise, we need to learn. So let's have a closer look to the second flock, which started in 2018. So yeah, the blue line is the average score non-trimmed flock of 2017. What we see is actually our second flock showed better feather cover up to 60 weeks, which is quite impressive, with smaller differences also between trimmed and non-trimmed hens. So we might say that improved management led to better feather scores and equal mortality, about 6% for both groups. Of course, this was quite a good result and a good flock. When we have a look at the third flock, which started in 2020, we only had non-trimmed hens, which were housed in our aviary systems. And we see a poor setup during a heat wave and also a rapid E. coli outbreak drastically affected feather scores and led to 30% mortality also. So highlighting also the impact of non-optimal conditions And also, yeah, you see a big effect of these non-optimal conditions, not only feather scores, but also in mortality, which is about 30%. And then actually the fourth flock, which started in 22, um, these actually showed the best results with close feather scores between trimmed and non-trimmed hens, and high feather scores at the end also of the flock. So let's move on to the take-home messages. What we see is that hens with intact beaks can thrive in a modern housing system, of course, but optimal housing and management prevent feather pecking and cannibalism in untrimmed flocks. Um, of course, there are also very important aspects about rearing, so rearing conditions, but also diet, adaptation, optimal support, lighting, which we have already talked about, also enrichment, environmental enrichment, and also breeds or hybrids. What we also saw is actually non-optimal triggers may escalate faster in non-trimmed flocks, even under good management. That's why these proactive hand measures, but also a good follow-up are quite crucial. That's actually what's been explained in the next sentence. So proactive monitoring might enable early detection and intervention for emerging welfare issues. So the refinement of follow-ups systems allows rapid data-driven decision making. It's actually kind of a wrap up for what I already mentioned. So a proactive hand management and a good follow-up and monitoring are crucial in order um, to have a good not only health, welfare, but also technical aspects in both trimmed and non-trimmed flocks, of course. So I've already showed you what we can do with the use of a camera, not only looking at videos, but also just looking at images being taken, like a kind of time lapse. What we also do is actually using different camera settings to monitor multiple welfare aspects. Let's have a look. So what we do here is at night focusing on the upper tiers in order to look at nighttime activity. Then we zoom in during the day in order to also do these feather scores automatically, which is still something we're working on. So I can't show you results of this automated feather scoring monitoring yet. And then, of course, the second one zoomed out, where we also have a look at the enrichment, but also the activity in the flock and yeah, how animals are moving during the day. Very briefly about piling behavior monitoring. It's something actually we see quite often in our laying hen house. Um, Not only in our laying hen house, but in Europe, both white and brown hens who pile, of course. As you can see on the image on the right upper or right corner, and it's quite a big issue. Of course, there's a risk of smothering, also injuries, and then we see an increase in mortality, which we don't want to see, of course. And what we tend to do is actually monitor these kinds of behaviors um, using a camera, which isn't quite easy, which is still some work we're doing and optimizing. We do this together with the KU Leuven and also the University of Bern. What we see in white hens, for instance, is that some birds tend to start a pile, and then a lot of other white birds join in. I think piling only takes 15 minutes in white hens, 15 to 20 minutes. So still quite short, but still we see a mortality increase by smothering. That's one aspect. In brown hens is quite different. Brown hens need a trigger, like someone entering the barn, and then they pile with loads of brown hens, and also the pile does take more longer, about 1 hour, sometimes even longer than 1 hour. So that's a bit different. And what we also intend to do in the project is look at hens. Um, the hens starting the pile and compare the phenotypes with the hens not engaging in the piles. So that's another research question we have. And then the last part of this presentation is about the health part, where I would like to briefly introduce you to the mite control project, where we try to manage poultry-red mites, which is still quite a big issue in poultry farming. And I also show you the results of the alternative hybrids, the Warren Brown, which I already mentioned for longevity. So mite control project has already ended, but the site is still available. For more information about this project, you can also Google it, and the, the 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 internet page is still available. Um, as mentioned, it's also an Interact Northern Western Europe project where we tend to look at poultry that might control. So not only the development, but also improvement and testing of non-chemical products. Why? Because it's still a problem in Europe. So most damaging poultry ectoparasite in the EU. It has a negative impact on health, but also on welfare, of course. And economic losses are quite high. Yeah, 30, not 361 euro, but 361 million euro in the EU. And these small ectoparasites, they are hiding in cracks. That's why you can see the picture on the right-hand side, someone who's doing poultry red mite monitoring. How do we monitor poultry red mite nowadays in our laying hen house? We have this protocol, it's actually called an MMS, where we have a look at 5 independent locations in our hen house, which of course we know are quite occupied by poultry red mite. And then we will have a look, and we have different scores. And in this way, we do it on different time points during the flock. And we also monitor it when we see numbers are getting quite high. Then we, of course, take some measures, and we do a treatment against poultry red mite in order to restore the balance and decrease the amounts of the poultry red mite in our hen house. And then the last part is all about the alternative hybrid, so the genetics, where we have done some tests on the Warren Brown laying hen, which is quite, it's actually a breed made for free range, but we applied it past flock in our aviary systems, and actually current flock we again have this hybrid. It's quite a robust hen, which is also highly productive. Has quite some good egg quality, but also, which is quite important for longevity, is that it's quite resilient. Not only resilient to stress, but resilient, having a strong plumage and a calm temperament, which is also good, and hoping not having feather pecking, for instance. So quite some good characteristics for extended laying cycles. which support, of course, longevity, the main goal of this project. Uh, I'll show you the results of past flock. So as already mentioned, our past flock stayed until 92 weeks. So both white and brown hens. And here you see the technical aspects. Um, I'll help you because yeah, I see the X's are still in French, but so the black line is the production in percentages. If you want to compare it with a standard, that's the gray line. The blue line is viability. So and the green line are the egg weights, and in the bars indicated in yellow are actually yeah, mortality in percentages each week. And what we do see is actually quite some high production. If we compare it with the other hybrids, which I'll do in the next slide, quite a good performance. Also, the egg weights are a bit less compared to, for instance, the Isa Brown hens. But when we look at the economic aspects, we see quite a low mortality. That's one. But if we look at the average egg weight, it's 61 gram. The cumulative number of eggs per hen housed is 444, and when we express this in kilograms, we get 27.2. So, but it's quite a good performance. So we see up to 90, up to 80 weeks, we have a production of more than 90%. And actually at an age of 92 weeks, when the hens were leaving our hen house, it was still 85.5%, which are quite good results. Here you actually see the results of our previous flock. So we, in the enriched cages, we had decalb white hens and Isa brown ones. In our aviary one row system, we also had decalb white and Isa brown. And on our aviary two row system, we had Isa brown and Warren brown hens. And actually here you have all the economic aspects. A very important one, if we, the Warren Brown, we do compare with the Isa Brown one. So mortality is lower. But also when we look at average egg weight is of course less. But when we have a look at the production, which was higher, which resulted in a higher cumulative eggs per placed hen. And when we look at the number of kilogram egg, yeah, we see similarities with the other Isa Brown hens. So what we can say is actually we get quite some good results with the Warren Brown flock, which demonstrated strong longevity and also good laying persistence. If you have a look, high and sustained egg production up to 92 weeks, which is very good. And also low cumulative mortality, of course, compared to the other flocks. When looking to welfare concern, here we see the results of the feather score conditions. So the aspect I actually explained in the previous chapter of this presentation. And if you have a look, so in green, Warren Brown is indicated. It's on the right graph. Then you see that feather condition scores are far better compared to the Isa Brown ones. So in that way, also quite a good result. And current flock, we are still, yeah, the hens are now 33 weeks old. So I can't give you some results on this flock, but we hope we get the same results, of course, and perhaps I can share them, yeah, maybe next year or so. Okay, that's actually the end of my presentation. I would like to thank everyone for listening. And if there are some questions, don't hesitate to contact or ask them.
Niels, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that was very simple and you have a lot of material. I don't know if the audience have a question, but I have one question. Maybe I'm not an expert in animal welfare or just a channel
Okay.
that share information, but I'm laughing right now because I'm very curious. But in your slides about the feathers
Yeah.
condition, you were saying that correct me if I'm wrong, if I understand this in the right way, that the feather condition you were able to measure stress, frustration, and boredom in the birds.
Well, but not measuring, but by performing the measure of the feather condition score.
So, so I was just curious how you can relate that states of I don't know, consciousness in a bird that bear is stress. Maybe I can see it that they behavior show stress, but frustration. I'm just curious how you measure that
Well,
name. Mhm.
we don't know if it's frustration, but feather packing might, of course, it's multifactorial, of course, but it might be from a frustration point of view, they start pecking each other. And actually, we only measure the consequences of the pecking. But
Okay,
by monitoring it, we know something changes. And in that way, we know management-wise, we should take action in order not to let the situation escalate.
okay. So yeah, well, I was just curious because obviously I have been in a lot of presentation on animal welfare, and
Mhm.
those parameters are very sometimes vague. How to measure? Obviously, we're looking for solutions more than naming things, but that's the only question. So if we don't have any more questions, Niels, thank you very much for the time. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're
And
most welcome.
this recording is gonna be shared in maybe 1 week and a half, and you will be able to watch it by free. And then we will encourage to everybody that watch it that can share it, so everybody can have this information. So Niels, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.